So Rabbi Tovia Singer is brilliant at helping people understand, first of all, the case for Judaism. He answers the theological challenges against it, but also unpacks anti-Semitism that sadly has animated parts of Christianity and Islam historically. By the way, we know that there are many people within the Christian community today who are very pro-Israel and pro-Jewish, and even some Muslims, by the way, as well. But sadly, there's also been a dark history as well of anti-Semitism there. And he helps people to understand what's really going on, particularly with the rise today of the Tucker Carlsons and the Candace Owens and others. And he thinks, as do I, that what animates them is at some level also theological. And if you don't understand that, you'll never really get to the bottom of all of this. So have a watch of what he has to say, and then I'll see you on the other side.
You hear that kind of echo from Tucker, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But replacement theology says the following, that the Jews, while they were chosen, because they not only killed Jesus, rejected him and conspired against him and lied about him, they are no longer the chosen people, and the church are the heirs to the blessings originally given to the Jews. But it's much more vicious than that. That's what would be called soft supersessionism. That is not the supersessionism of Tucker and of Nick Fuentes and of Candace. The hard supersessionism is that of Augustine, that of John Chrysostom, and I want the viewer to understand this. In the view of Augustine, who is a prolific writer, a virulent anti-Semite, just something beyond your imagination. If Augustine wrote what he wrote in Austria or Canada, he'd be thrown in prison. Much worse than what Nick Fuentes says about Jews. But Augustine, in his magnum opus, The City of God, and in other writings, he addresses the question of why are the Jews still here if they're no longer chosen, if they don't have the blessing? Why are the Jews still around? The blessing, after all, is that we're an eternal nation. So the question that came to him was numerous that he addresses in this apologetic work. But the key, what we're curious about, is his view of the Jews. And he said the reason why the Jews are still here is they're here as a witness people, and they're here to testify to what happens to a people that not only reject Jesus, but kill him. They are destined to live in a degraded state, protected by the church, but they must be seen by the world. This is what happens to a people that reject Jesus, conspire against him, lyingly. It's not that the Jews in the church's view misunderstood it. It was malevolent. The Jews concocted spurious claims against Jesus and made sure that he was killed. And therefore, the Jews must live in a degraded state. It's Augustine's view. It's Chrysostom's view. That was the view of, it continues to be the view of the Orthodox Church, and would continue to be the view of the Roman Catholic Church. And I want to bring us to our time. Three very critical events occur. In 1802, there was a man in England born. His name is John Nelson Darby. He was a theologian. He came to the United States with an incredible proposal. His idea was that everything the church had taught about replacement theology was wrong, and that the Jews are chosen, the blessings still belong to the Jews. It doesn't mean Jews are going to heaven, but Jews have an earthly covenant with God, and Israel belongs to the Jews. The United States had a very favorable view of Jewish people. The founding fathers, whether it was Hamilton or George Washington, not only had a favorable view of Jews. Hamilton spoke Hebrew, he went to Hebrew school in Nevis, and they also despised the Church of England. They hated George III, for obvious reasons. And therefore, this idea that the Jews are special and chosen, Israel belongs to Jews, spread like wildfire because of lawmakers like Cyrus Schofield of Kansas and Moody and many others. And the idea of Christian Zionism explodes in the U.S. This could have never happened in Europe, never happened anywhere else. So therefore, Christian Zionism is so huge in the United States. It's the largest voting bloc in America. Estimates are 1 out of 5 Americans is a Christian Zionist. It's huge. Event number 2. in an auspicious day, January 25th, 1905, Theodore Herzl gains an audience with Pope Pius X. Pius X. It was a fool's errand, but Herzl made a case for the Pope that you please recognize the Jewish state. Pius X said to him, if you don't recognize our Lord and Savior, we're not recognizing your state. It was a mistake for you not to convert to Christianity. We can't stop you from coming to Israel, but if you Jews show up in Palestine, our priests will be waiting there to baptize you. This is very, very critical. So he is a anti-modernist, highly traditionalist pope, and he sets the stage for the famed Pope Pius XII. This is not an accident. Pius XII was Hitler's pope. He reigned for 19 years and collaborated with the Nazis. He was the one who shaped the Concordat, the diplomatic relations between the Third Reich and the Vatican. The Vatican did not recognize Israel and would not until 1993 for reasons that are not germane to our conversation. I don't need to explain to you what happened to Rome's Jews. They were carried away on October 16, 1943. Only 16 survived right under the nose of Pius XII. The scandal was beyond this. Pius XII issued memos that no Jewish child that was given to a Christian family that was baptized should be returned back to the family. He had an office set aside for hiding Nazis and giving them new identities in South America. It's just a nightmare. The point is that by the time Pius XII dies in October 9th, 1958, the church had a scandal on its hands, and it brought in a very interesting man. His name was John the 23rd. He's also known as the Good Pope. He was a genuine Philo-Semite. The Catholic Church is very good at, when they have a scandal, bringing a new fat guy from Argentina. I didn't mean that disparagingly. They're just bringing this nice face on the church, and then you get rid of the scandals of the past. And they brought in the 23rd, who was very pro-Jewish. He saved many Jews during the Holocaust. He launches the Second Vatican Council. The document that everyone knows about it because it's most provocative is Nostra Aetate in our time. The fourth chapter, the Jews are exonerated. The Jews of today are exonerated for killing Jesus. And in fact, the Jews are our elder brother. It's very positive. It doesn't undo replacement theology, but this does change the view of mainstream Roman Catholics about Jews. That's why you can have Catholic people like Marco Rubio and Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich. They're all Catholics. They all love Israel. Okay. However, there is the Candace Owens version, which is a nightmare. What's called a radical traditional iteration of Roman Catholicism that specifically rejects the Second Vatican Council. Now, I'm not going to take the time. I'm going to name just organizations. There are a lot to us. If you're not Catholic, it doesn't matter. But you have Sedevacantists. They don't accept any pope after Pius XII. SSPX, the Society of St. Pius X. You can understand why Pius X is a hero to these people. The Remnant, that's Michael Matt's group. This is CIC. This is the Christian Identity Conference. They hate Israel. They hate the Second Vatican Council. This is not Megyn Kelly. This is not people who are, I don't take this personally. It's not like Kamala Harris, who didn't really have a strong support for Israel. Whether you like or don't, it's not that. It's not that at all. These guys hate Israel because, and this is very critical, because all the church fathers said with one voice, the Jews are accursed, the Jews are rejected by God, the Jews lost the covenant, and most importantly, they will never return to the land of Israel, never have sovereignty over Israel, and Jerusalem will never belong to them. And that's why the Vatican did not recognize the state of Israel. In fact, in 1947, they did everything possible to prevent the 33-13 vote. The Vatican was working very hard against it. Ultimately, it didn't work, and the vote went in the proper direction. But the key is that she, because of there are many factors here. There are people who I believe acted irresponsibly with her, but whatever it was, she joins George Farmer's iteration of Roman Catholicism. The key of all these groups, SSPX, CIC, all these groups are that they oppose Second Vatican Council. They oppose Nostra Aetate. They oppose Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel because you need to understand that John Chrysostom, 4th, 5th century church father, Archbishop of Constantinople, you don't know the magnitude of his anti-Semitism. If you read it, you really would be surprised. The only thing akin to it is Luther. Luther was a crazed anti-Semite, crazy. It just, in fact, when Streicher at Nuremberg, when he was defending himself, he said, there's nothing that I had said in Der Stürmer that Luther had not said prior to him, and he was being fairly accurate. So Candace joins not just Roman Catholicism, but it is specifically this virulent anti-Semitic iteration of Roman Catholicism. And unfortunately, there were many other dumb things that she said and she should have walked it back when she was talking about isolationism and things about Hitler. She should have said, I made a mistake. But that was not, I don't have to explain all that. So that's what we're looking at now. And now you mentioned Charlie Kirk. God rest his soul. He was more than other dispensationalists in that he defended not only Israel, but he defended the Jews, he even defended the Talmud. And it sounds like you really follow this. I've never, and I have given Mike Huckabee tours of Israel by helicopter, and he's a great guy. But Charlie was just off the charts great. I believe when Charlie was alive that within 10 years he'd be president of the United States. His kind of grit, his intellect, his communication skills, there is no one else like him. And there'll be other people that'll, just like this, Trump is unique, and there's not going to be another Charlie Combs. So right now, I'm going to say what everyone knows. The Turning Point USA is the most important organization in the conservative voice in the Republican Party, and there is a war going on for his legacy. Trump is not going to change. Trump was always pro-Jewish, always pro-Israel, and his father, Robert of blessed memory, was the same. It's just the way the family is. However, everybody is looking at 2028. Who is going to take over? Who is going to be the heir? And I'm not going to pretend to know that, to know the answer to that question, but that's what's happening now. Tucker Carlson despises Israel. He openly says that he hates Christian Zionists. He tried to walk it back, but that didn't come out of anywhere.
So I have to be honest, I really do agree with Rabbi Tovia Singer that I do think that in the case of Tucker and, or that whole group of commentators, a big part of it is theological. Yes, there might be some sense of I can be more outrageous, I can capture an audience here, I can be, blah, blah, blah. There can be all the other explanations, but I actually think a big part of it is theological. And the only way we deal with that is to go theological as well. I do find it pretty remarkable as well that we're starting to see more and more of the geopolitical events and the events that the world are so focused on are so intertwined with theology and what people's narratives are about the way history is meant to unfold. It seems to me almost as if we're being forced to bring in theology and God into the whole discussion, because that's what this ultimately comes down to. That's what we've been saying for so long about what's really going on in the Israeli-Arab conflict, that this is not political, this is theological. That the whole Palestinian cause is dressed up simply because they're trying to pull at Western heartstrings in order to justify a religious belief that Islam should overtake the region and the world. And a similar thing is happening here with a Christian-informed replacement theology that hates on Israel and the Jews. It comes from the same darker parts of the human psyche, the human emotion, that is animating the anti-Israel cause from the Muslim world. And what is that? It's a deep resentment and maybe jealousy, envy, grievance with the fact that the Jewish people are God's chosen people. chosen to be his light to the world, which really, if they thought about it, should be a massive blessing that they celebrate. But instead, the Christian world, well, the anti-Semites within the Christian world, have basically created this narrative of, no, we are the new chosen people through the New Testament. God has broken his eternal covenant with Israel. Not quite sure how God can break an eternal covenant, and I'm not quite sure why they have so much faith and trust in God's promises now if he breaks them. But the narrative has to be that way, that the Jews are just the wandering Jew of history, and they actually pointed to the persecution of the Jews throughout history to show, look, see, God clearly doesn't like them, doesn't have much time for them. And so their narrative is that we are the new chosen, and that's our destiny, and the Jews are assigned to the dustbin of history. Then comes along the Muslim world, Islam, and they say, no, actually we are the final vessels of God's light, the final chosen people through Islam, and anyone that rejects us, they are rejected, and they should be fought and challenged. Now, in either case, your narrative becomes quite easy to perpetuate when the Jews are downtrodden, when they are the wandering Jew. Suddenly, things become a lot more painful and challenging, and your whole narrative is threatened when the Jews return to their land, return to sovereignty, start to seemingly go through a redemptive process, where it seems like God's promises of exile and dispersion, they're now reminded that there's another part to that. If you read the book of Deuteronomy, Devarim, that God says, I'll return them to the land at the end of history. I'll restore them because the covenant is eternal and they will always be my nation. And so what do you do with that? If you believe in replacement theology, or if you are, believe in political Islam that says Islam is going to conquer the world. Certainly the Middle East, the world of Arabia. What do you do with Israel's return? Well, you have two choices. I think part of the reason why you had a stronger response from the Muslim world than the Christian world is because the Holocaust had just taken place in the Christian world. And I think there's an enormous sense of guilt and realization that this can't go on. That's what led to the Vatican Council meetings, where they officially announced we no longer hold the Jews in plural, accountable for the killing of Jesus. They recognize what all this hatred and darker parts of theology had led to and was leading to. And the Muslim world hadn't quite had that same level of moral evaluation, moral self-reflection, because the Holocaust took place in Europe primarily. So they're now thinking, whoa, Jews re-establishing sovereignty here in their ancient homeland? Well, it's time for us to oppose this. This must be a test from God. This must be a, personification of the Satan. That, the conflict now all makes sense, doesn't it? And that's what's really going on here. Now, for as long as your narrative is that God has forsaken the Jews, then you're going to continue to believe you need to hate on the Jews. But the reason why one of the strongest allies of Israel and the Jews and supporters of the Jews in the Christian world has been, for example, the evangelical community, is because they went through a theological reevaluation, where they said, hold on one second, maybe God never dropped his covenant with Israel, with the Jews. That probably would make a lot more sense, given that he promised that again and again and again, that it would be eternal and he would never forsake them. And that there is no condition on which the covenant continues to stand. There's a condition on which the Jews stay in the land of Israel versus be in exile, but stop being God's chosen nation? Never. So the resolution to all of this is that there needs to be a theological reevaluation. And the way that happens is actually, I think, at a human emotional level. Because as I said earlier on, What drives this theological hatred is actually coming from the darker parts of human psyche, human emotion. It drives them towards jealousy, envy, resentment. What's remarkable is that this goes back to the oldest story in history. The first time where we suddenly see the fracturing of a fallen world. What's that? The story of Cain and Abel. Happens at the beginning of human history. God chooses Abel's offering and not Cain's. And Cain, instead of trying to understand what Abel did so he could learn with him, to partner with him, to work with him, instead he goes down the path of jealousy and resentment. God chose yours and not mine. I'm going to kill you. It's all there from the very beginning. So what's the solution to envy and jealousy? The solution is pride. Pride in being in a world in which there's someone here who has a, particular divine mission that is there actually to be a blessing to me, because Israel are meant to be a light to the nations, which means the nations are a critical part of the story. They receive this light. And pride in who I am. Pride in the fact that I have a role to play in this story too. I can learn from Israel, and I can also play a particular, distinct, unique role using all of my talent, skills, blessings, and learn from Israel's values in order to be the best that I can be. We don't all need to be on an equal footing. We all need to be equally indispensable, equally unique. That's the mistake of saying, no, we're all the same, we're all chosen, we're all chosen to be here, but we're not all chosen for the same job, otherwise we'd be dispensable. That's part of the message of the Jewish people. There's a chosen people within the chosen people, the Kohanim, the high priests. Do I feel resentful, jealous, envious of the fact that I'm not one of the high priests? No. In some ways, I think it's a huge amount of responsibility to be a high priest. I'm comfortable just being, it actually turns out that I'm a Levi, which means I also have some particular responsibilities, as opposed to just being just a member of Israel, one of the other tribes. But the point is that, you can go down two very, very different paths. One path is one of jealousy, it's dark, and the other one is path of pride, collaboration, and it uplifts everyone. Everyone is necessary in this story. It's just about embracing your own unique role. So if we could deal with this, if we could come to terms with this, then it would solve a lot. And I have a lot of people, they say to me, Ollie, stop talking about the whole chosen thing. I say, let me try and deny it or ignore it. The Tucker Carlsons and others, they'll keep bringing it up. The only way to deal with this, given that we've been chosen now and it's done, it's happened, is to help people come to terms with it. And that means that we own it. So that's what we've got to do. Let's own it. For too long, the Jews, when people say you chosen, we say, oh, no, come on, we're a people that chooses. We're a choosing people. Or God's chosen all of us, really. We have to have a little bit more or a little bit less humility. Because this is not out of arrogance. This is out of us having the confidence to do the task that we are destined to do. Just hang on for a moment. After covering Israel for years, I've realised that most of the lies boil down to one simple tactic used by Israel's enemies from the very start: the deliberate reversal of cause and effect. And our new documentary exposes exactly how this works. Have a watch of our trailer for our new film called The Great Reversal, and you can watch it in full right now by clicking the link below in the video description. For decades, one idea has shaped how much of the world understands the Israel-Palestine conflict. Israel did something wrong, and the Palestinians simply resisted. Whether it's 1948 or the recent war in Gaza, the story is the same every time. Israel provokes, Palestinians resist. Israel oppresses, Palestinians fight back. This narrative dominates campuses, the media, and much of global politics. It feels familiar, it feels intuitive, and for many people, it feels true. But what if the sequence is backwards? What if the origin point and every major chapter that followed has been told in reverse? In the wars of 1948 and 67, in the collapse of Oslo, in the suicide bombings of the Intifada, in the rockets after Israel withdrew from Gaza, in the massacre of October 7th, and the global narrative that followed. In this JTV Plus documentary, we're going to expose the great lie that has reversed cause and effect, a narrative engineered to help the real aggressors erode Israel's legitimacy. We'll trace the conflict from its origins to the present day, revealing how at every stage the true sequence of events was inverted, how aggression was reframed as resistance, how defense was recast as provocation, and how a conflict rooted in hatred of Jews was deliberately twisted into a story that blames the Jews. Join us as we restore the story to the order in which it actually happened and uncover the truth hidden beneath a century of lies. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.